In today's video, I am showing my favorite aspect ratio for shooting dramatic landscapes just like these. So we're talking aspect ratios today. I mean, who cares, right? Well, if you haven't ever really given much consideration to your aspect ratios and your crops in your images, then it could be time to start paying attention, because those considerations can really make a huge impact in your photos. Aspect ratios and crops are all part of your photo's composition, and it is composition which is what makes an image great. So let's skip just straight to the main point. The aspect ratio I'm talking about is 2:4, or really I suppose 1:2 as I should call it, because that's the same thing. Strictly speaking, it is a panoramic aspect ratio, which means that it is at least twice as wide as it is tall. Now for me, when I think panorama, I think a really wide image, a very thin strip, maybe the sort of thing you take with your iPhone by just sweeping it around the scene. For me though, a 2:4 or a 1:2 isn't quite a panorama, although it is technically panoramic. It looks like a regular crop, but it seems to have quite a lot more impact in many ways. So it can be really great for landscapes, but simply applying that 2:4 or 1:2 crop to your image is not necessarily going to make it an absolutely incredible shot. So let's dive over into Lightroom and take a look at some examples of when it really can work, and also some shots where it doesn't work, so you can get an idea of when or when not to apply it. So I put a bunch of examples together, and these are shots that I've taken over the last year or so when I've been able to explore Edinburgh and Scotland. I'm going to dive in straight away. This shot here, this is one that I took on Mull, and in fact let's just go ahead for the sake of argument and reset the crop back to its original. So this is the crop straight out of camera, as in there isn't any crop on it, it is just how I framed up my image. I know that I was looking at keeping this rock in just to not cut that out, so my composition was certainly considered, but now I've had a bit more time to look at it. The things that I think can go is a lot of this sky, as just a lot of sort of empty sky. Yes, there is cloud detail, but there's not generally a lot going on. Similarly, a lot of this foreground is just ferns and grass. All of the interesting stuff going on in this image is stretched across the middle of the frame. We've got the nice rocks here, we've got the beach, we've got this thing, this little island, and of course these mountains in the background. And those are the things that I want to be absolutely center in the frame. And it's in shots like that that I want to use this sort of aspect ratio. So let's just go and we can choose down here 2:4, and straight away you can see that it's narrowed everything in really nicely. We've still got plenty of sky. It's not about cutting out the sky completely. It's just about giving the suggestion that that sky is there, but you don't need to show the whole thing. It's really focusing that view on the things in the middle. We can still move it up a little bit and just sort of make sure this rock isn't slightly cut off. Still having kind of our rule of thirds going through here, this beach, and this one going through the horizon line on the top, which I think looks really nicely. Already I think this shot has a lot more impact. The eye is drawn more naturally to the actual subjects in this shot, and it gives that impression of seeing this wider landscape stretching out in front of you. So I think it works really well here. Let's go back to our other examples, and I'll flick through some of the other ones. This one, for example, again, a 2:4 is about showing this wide scene in front of us. There's lots of people walking their dogs or just out with their families. There was a lot going on. We've got the beautiful light going over the sort of the sand dunes as the coast, as the water has gone out. So I think it works really well. If we look at the original here, we can see we've got a lot of empty sky up the top, and we've just got a little bit of extra sand down at the bottom. It doesn't really add anything. This is just sort of plain cloud up here. So yeah, we could have kept it at that, or we could have even gone to 16:9, but we've still got a lot of sky here, which doesn't really add anything more to the shot. So instead, going with that 2:4 aspect ratio, keeping it nice and narrow, nice and wide, we're still capturing all of the scene. Everything that's important is still very much visible in there. If anything, by keeping it narrow, we're drawing the viewer's eye only to those things rather than elements which just are not necessary. And that really is the point of cropping anyway. It's about focusing your audience's attention on the parts of the image that you think are more important. So we can have a look at this one here. And again, it was about going wide. We've got just a little suggestion of the grass bank and the flowers here. We've got Edinburgh sweeping away in the distance, this figure walking through the middle, the Arthur's Seat and the towers of the church in the background. It works really well as a wide shot. If this was not wide, we'd have too much sky, we'd have more of these tree branches, more of the what looks like muddy ground in the immediate foreground. By going wide, we've cut those elements out and just focused on what's important throughout the middle of the scene. Let's look at another one. Again, same thing. The actual subject is, of course, Arthur's Seat, Salisbury Crags, and the city in the distance. The foreground, we've just got plain, empty grass, and in the sky, it's just more clouds. But we've got plenty of clouds, so we don't need to keep all of that in with a really, with like a 3:4 aspect ratio. We've gone wide, we've gone thin, and I think it works really, really well here. And I can keep on showing some more examples. Let's have a look at this one of a snowy day in Edinburgh. I really, really like this shot. I love the evening light sort of coming in across the buildings. And again, it was all about focusing that attention. Let's just go back to our original on this one again. And it's a perfectly fine scene still, but we've got all of this sort of snow in the foreground, which isn't adding anything to the shot. And again, above, there is just a bit too much sky. It's just this big block here, which is just sort of there, and it's nice, but we've still got plenty of sky to see in the middle of the scene. So again, narrowing it down, doing this wider aspect ratio like that, just focuses the shot and looks really, for me, it just has a lot more impact. And of course, all of this is just down to personal preference, down to what it is that you want to achieve with your shots. This one, for example, I really wanted to use like the negative space around the tree to kind of show that it's isolated by itself. And that is also what I wanted to do with this shot. It's not a landscape, I suppose, but this parent and child trudging through the snow, by using that negative space away from them, you really get this sense that they are in like this wide expanse of snow and it's just them. So again, it's just about thinking about your compositions, thinking about what it is you want to do with your image and how a crop can help you tell that story. So let's take a look at some shots where I don't think it works quite so well. Start with this one. And what was this originally? This may be a 16:9 at the moment. It is. Go back to our original aspect ratio. So there's a lot that I like in the composition. Obviously, we've got the building in the middle, this lovely sweep of this sort of cliff face on the left, and of course our immediate rocks in our foreground. But there's quite a lot going on all around that I'm not sure would really work with a particularly narrow aspect ratio. I think it could be tightened up a little bit. First of all, is our horizon straight? I think it is. So let's go 16:9, because that is cutting off a little bit of that sky. It's also cutting off some of this dead space down here, which is certainly something that I do want to address. There's just a lot of kind of empty space that I don't think needs to be in the image. So by going with a 16:9, we've just tightened up the frame, and that means that everything in this shot, every pixel that we're looking at is important. Everything has its place in the scene, whereas before, I don't think it necessarily did. But let's go now to the 2:4, and suddenly we're cutting off too much. Everything now becomes a little bit too squashed in. I'm trying to keep in this little headland of rock down here, but in so doing, we're very, very tight on the rock up here. And if we just, apply that crop, suddenly it's too narrow. Nothing has breathing room. This is almost off the frame, and this is barely in the frame. Maybe we could go in even tighter and do something like this, but again, now we've just got this little rock sticking out. It doesn't work at all. I don't like that. It's not good for the image. Let's put it back to 16:9, go back to how it was. I think this is a much better shot, gives everything a little bit more breathing room. And I think the same is the case probably on this image. This may be the original aspect ratio. It is, yep. So we just tightened it in. The flow of the image, it's sort of going down through here. If we have a look at our grid, it's very much applying to the rule of thirds here, and kind of the way this rock is sort of flowing down here. It's cutting across this middle section, and then we've got the rocks down here. If we go 2:4, again, we're not giving anything much breathing room. This top of this hill is cutting off a little bit too close to the frame, and this is a little bit too close down here. It's looking a little bit squashed in, and I don't think we need so much wide information, because we've got a lot of sort of ocean around here, that by going wide we're really kind of saying that this is part of the image, and I'm just not necessarily sure that we need to. I mean, that kind of argues against what I said before about using negative space to kind of show isolation in a scene, but I just don't think it works in quite the same way here. This is a shot that may even work as a 1x1. Maybe something like this. So we're showing that sky, so it's all about finding. In fact, I think that does work quite well as a 1x1. So what I'm trying to say is that not everything is going to work really well as a panorama. Just because it is a wide landscape doesn't mean that cropping in super wide is going to necessarily be the right decision for that image. It's about looking at where the different elements are and figuring out how it is that you want those represented in your shot. Let's have a look at one more example. This is one of these lovely waterfalls that I did back in autumn. If we go to our develop module, bring up our aspect ratio here, I think at the moment it's at original, and that's fine. I think I would want to crop in, at least in the original, a bit more, just to get rid of this empty white bit of sky up here. Already I think that looks a lot better. I think I may have done a 16:9 version of this, and that could work quite well. 16:9 is still fairly wide. It's quite cinematic because a lot of feature films are shot in 16:9. That's your aspect ratio of your TV. And so I do think that kind of works, but it is starting to cut off some of the trees, and it already feels in a little boxed into me. And so certainly going one step further and doing 2x4, we're suddenly losing a lot of the impact of these trees up here. We're cutting off things that we want to be visible in the scene. So I'd have to have a look at what is in this shot to begin with. What do we want to keep in? And what I want is these trees. It's showing colors. It's showing that there's more forest going away into the scene. I like this branch going up here, and if we crop in too tight, we lose all of that. We certainly lose like their place in the image. And so for me, this original aspect ratio is exactly what I want to go with. All these elements make sense in this scene. So no, a panoramic does not work here. It's not a panoramic scene, even though there is lots of things around the middle of the frame. Everything else makes sense as well. So it's about studying your scene and understanding what needs to be in it and what doesn't. And that's something that you should be doing when you're out shooting on location, looking at your image through your viewfinder and really trying to make sense of those elements before you take the shot, and then trying to refine that further when you take your shot into Lightroom. It's difficult to rescue bad composition, but you can certainly give your image more impact. But you get my point. You see what we're doing. Let's have a look at this one though, because this one is maybe a good example. Because again, it's about this wasted space at the top. It's just more sky and more leaves, and we don't necessarily need all of that. So we go into our aspect ratio, 2x4, and then we can bring it down so we're still capturing some of this water reflection. We've still got the lovely autumnal leaves framing our shot, but now it's really focusing on the panorama of the city in front of it. Edinburgh Castle on the hill, this church tower being framed by these leaves in a way that before we just had too many leaves, too many distractions. I can't remember whether I'd considered it as a panorama when I took the shot, but certainly now I've come back in to Lightroom, it works much better. So that's really what it's all about, studying your scene and working out what's best. And for me, I really do like these aspect ratios. They don't always work, and as I've shown some examples here of when they don't, but when they do work, I think they work really well. They can definitely give your image a lot of impact. So it is definitely something that I encourage you to take a look at some of your shots. Maybe have a look at your existing libraries and have a look and see whether you can transform the look of an image by giving it that more panoramic 2x4 1x2 aspect ratio. There are some downsides, of course, in that you're taking an image and then basically deleting a lot of information. And so if you're maybe considering, if you're shooting on a low resolution camera and you're wanting to print them, then yeah, it's worth thinking about that you're getting rid of that resolution even more, which may not be the best thing to do, but it's certainly worth experimenting with. It does bring me to an end today. Thank you so much for watching. I've been a little bit absent with some of my videos recently. There's been a lot of things going on. I'm going to try and get back into a bit more of a routine of publishing weekly. As always, though, if you have enjoyed this video, do please hit that like button, leave your thoughts about this in the comment box below, and I will see you next time.